The news headlines spread quietly at first, then everywhere. The tenant dispute has reached the court, and Barış Arduç has won the case. But behind this single line was a long story, one that very few people actually knew. Barış Arduç was known to the public as calm, respectful, and private. He rarely spoke about personal matters, especially anything related to legal issues. So when rumors started circulating about a property dispute, many people were surprised. Some assumed it was exaggerated gossip. Others believed it would quietly disappear like many celebrity rumors do. It did not. The story began with a property Barış had purchased years earlier. It was not a luxury villa or a flashy investment. It was a modest apartment, chosen carefully and managed responsibly. For him, it was not just an asset. It was a symbol of stability, something built with hard work and patience. At first, everything went smoothly. The tenant moved in, the agreement was clear, and communication was polite. Months passed without any issue. Barış never interfered unnecessarily and respected boundaries. He believed that trust was the foundation of any agreement. But slowly, small problems appeared. Payments started arriving late. Messages went unanswered. Promises were made and then quietly broken. At first, Barış chose understanding over confrontation. He believed that people sometimes face difficulties and deserve time. He waited. Weeks turned into months. The situation did not improve. Instead, excuses replaced explanations and silence replaced communication. Friends advised him to take action early, but Barış hesitated. He did not want conflict. He wanted a solution that was fair for everyone involved. Behind closed doors, however, the stress grew. Property responsibilities do not disappear simply because someone avoids them. Bills still existed. Legal obligations remained. The longer the issue continued, the more complicated it became. Finally, Barış made a decision that he never wanted to make. He contacted his legal team. This was not done in anger or revenge. It was done with clarity. Every document was reviewed carefully. Every message was preserved. Nothing was rushed. Barış wanted the truth to speak for itself. When the tenant was officially notified, the reaction was unexpected. Instead of cooperation, denial appeared. Claims were made that did not match the records. Verbal statements contradicted written agreements. What could have ended with a simple discussion slowly transformed into a legal dispute. The matter reached the courtroom. For Barış, this was unfamiliar territory. Cameras were always present in his professional life, but this was different. This was not a role. This was real. He chose silence over public explanation. No interviews. No social media statements. He trusted the process. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was calm but serious. Facts mattered more than fame. Documents mattered more than reputation. The judge listened patiently as both sides presented their arguments. Barış's legal team focused only on evidence. Payment records. Contract terms. Official notices. Nothing emotional, nothing exaggerated. Just the truth, presented clearly. The other side struggled to maintain consistency. Statements shifted. Timelines changed. The courtroom did not respond to noise or confusion. It responded to clarity. Days passed. During this time, public speculation increased. Headlines grew bolder. Social media filled with assumptions. Some supported Barış without knowing the details. Others questioned why the issue had reached this stage at all. Barış said nothing. Privately, the waiting was difficult. Court cases move slowly, and patience is tested at every step. But he reminded himself why he chose this path. Not to punish, but to resolve. Not to dominate, but to protect what was rightfully his. Then came the final hearing. The judge reviewed the documents one last time. Questions were asked. Answers were given. The courtroom felt heavy with anticipation. Silence filled the space before the decision was announced. The ruling was clear. The court decided in favor of Barış Arduç. There was no dramatic reaction. No celebration. Just a quiet breath of relief. Justice did not shout. It spoke calmly and firmly. The decision confirmed what the documents had shown all along. The agreement had been violated. Responsibilities had been ignored. The law had done its job. When the news finally became public, the headline traveled fast. But most people only saw the ending, not the long road that led there. For Barış, the case was never about winning. It was about standing firm without losing dignity. He did not insult. He did not accuse publicly. He allowed the system to work. That choice earned him something more valuable than a legal victory: respect. As he returned to his daily life, the experience stayed with him. It was a reminder that even calm people are sometimes pushed into difficult decisions. And when that happens, choosing patience and truth can still lead to the right outcome. But this was only the beginning of how the story would be understood. Because every legal victory leaves behind questions, and every silence hides lessons. The court's decision closed the case on paper, but in real life, it opened a new chapter. For Barış Arduç, the days after the verdict were unexpectedly quiet. No press conference followed. No long statements appeared online. He returned to work, to routines, to the steady rhythm he trusted. Still, the experience lingered. Legal matters have a way of staying with you, even after they end. Friends and colleagues reached out privately. Some congratulated him. Others asked careful questions, trying to understand what had really happened. Barış listened more than he spoke. He had learned something important during the process. Not every truth needs to be defended loudly. Outside his circle, the public conversation continued to grow. Social media simplified the story into sides. Supporters praised his patience and integrity. Critics speculated without evidence. A few voices tried to turn the issue into something dramatic, something emotional. Barış did not engage. He knew that once a story leaves your hands, it changes shape quickly. Instead, he focused on what came next. The property still needed attention. Legal clarity did not automatically repair months of disruption. There were practical steps to take, and Barış handled them methodically. He followed procedures, respected timelines, and avoided unnecessary confrontation. He believed that even after conflict, professionalism mattered. What surprised him most was not the outcome, but the lesson. During the dispute, he had often asked himself whether silence was the right choice. There were moments when explaining everything publicly seemed tempting. Clearing his name felt important, especially as rumors spread. But each time he chose restraint. Looking back now, he realized that silence had protected him. The court had spoken clearly. Anything more would only add noise. As weeks passed, public interest slowly shifted elsewhere, as it always does. New headlines replaced old ones. But for Barış, the experience reshaped how he viewed responsibility. Being a public figure did not shield him from ordinary problems. If anything, it made them more visible. A disagreement that might have stayed private for others became national conversation for him. That realization brought both humility and caution. He began reviewing other agreements in his life more carefully. Not because he distrusted people, but because clarity prevents conflict. He also spoke with younger colleagues, not giving advice, but sharing perspective. He reminded them that professionalism is not tested when things go well. It is tested when they do not. Meanwhile, the tenant involved in the case faded from the headlines. Legal decisions tend to do that. Once resolved, attention moves on. Barış never spoke negatively about them. He avoided personal commentary. For him, the case was about actions, not character. That choice earned quiet appreciation from many who noticed. Behind the scenes, producers and partners took note as well. Reliability matters in every industry. How someone handles pressure says a lot about how they handle success. Barış's calm approach reinforced the image many already had of him. Still, the experience left a question in his mind. Why do simple agreements sometimes turn into complex conflicts? He reflected on how easily misunderstandings grow when communication breaks down. How avoidance can quietly escalate issues. How respect must be active, not assumed. These thoughts stayed with him long after the legal documents were filed away. One evening, while reviewing scripts at home, Barış paused. The silence felt different now. It was no longer tense or uncertain. It was settled. He realized that closure does not always arrive with excitement. Sometimes it arrives gently when you stop carrying unresolved weight. The story, however, was not finished in the public eye. Journalists continued to revisit it, often missing the point. They focused on the win, not the process. On the name, not the lesson. Barış accepted that this was part of life in the spotlight. You cannot control what people focus on, only how you respond. He chose consistency. Over time, the narrative softened. What remained was a simple understanding. A dispute had occurred. The legal system addressed it, and dignity was maintained. No scandals. No bitterness. Just resolution. For Barış, that was enough. Yet deep down, he knew that every experience leaves a mark. This one made him more deliberate, more grounded. It reminded him that fairness requires effort and patience, and that sometimes the strongest response is letting the truth stand on its own. As he stepped forward into new projects and responsibilities, the case became a quiet reference point. Not a burden, but a reminder. Time has a way of reshaping experiences. What once felt heavy slowly turns into understanding. For Barış Arduç, the Tenant case did exactly that. It stopped being a headline and became a lesson, one that influenced choices in subtle but lasting ways. Months passed. Work schedules filled his calendar again. Sets changed, faces changed, stories changed. On the surface, everything looked the same. Yet inside, something had shifted. He had become more attentive to details he once trusted would take care of themselves. Not out of fear, out of awareness. Barış noticed this first when reviewing new contracts. He asked clearer questions. He requested more precise timelines. Not because he expected problems, but because clarity creates confidence. People around him adapted quickly. In fact, many appreciated the structure. It made collaboration easier. The legal experience had sharpened his sense of balance. Around this time, a close acquaintance reached out with a problem of their own. It was a minor dispute, nothing public, nothing dramatic. But the frustration in their voice sounded familiar. They wanted advice. Not legal advice, but perspective. Barış listened carefully. He did not interrupt. When they finished, he spoke slowly. He did not suggest confrontation. He did not suggest avoidance either. He suggested communication, documented clearly, calmly, and early. Problems grow when silence replaces clarity, he said. It was something he had learned the hard way. That conversation stayed with him. He realized that the value of an experience increases when it helps others avoid the same mistakes. He did not need to speak publicly to share that value. It moved quietly, person to person. Meanwhile, the media occasionally resurfaced the story, often tied to unrelated news. The phrasing changed each time. Sometimes supportive, sometimes neutral, rarely accurate in detail. Barış accepted this without frustration. He understood how narratives evolve. What mattered was how he moved forward. A new project brought him into unfamiliar territory. Different responsibilities, different expectations. Early on, a small disagreement appeared within the team. Nothing serious, but enough to cause tension. Barış recognized the pattern immediately. Instead of letting it sit, he addressed it. He requested a meeting. He listened to every side. He asked for written confirmation of decisions. No raised voices. No blame. Just structure. The issue resolved quickly, leaving behind respect instead of resentment. Later, a colleague thanked him privately. They said the situation could have escalated if ignored. Barış smiled. He knew where that path led. At home, in quieter moments, he reflected on how public attention often misses the deeper transformation. Winning a case is visible. Learning from it is not. Yet the second is far more important. He also thought about responsibility. Owning property, signing agreements, working with people. None of these are simple when trust breaks down. But avoiding responsibility does not prevent conflict. Facing it early often does. That understanding made him more selective. Not only about contracts, but about partnerships. He valued transparency over speed, consistency over convenience. Some opportunities were politely declined because they lacked clarity. Others improved because he asked the right questions. This approach did not slow him down. It steadied him. One afternoon, while reviewing plans for the coming year, Barış paused. He realized that the tenant dispute had quietly shaped his path without defining him. It did not harden him. It refined him. That distinction mattered. Public figures are often expected to react dramatically, to defend, to explain, to justify. Barış chose a different path. He allowed the system to work. He allowed time to pass. And he allowed lessons to settle naturally. People close to him noticed the difference. He was the same, yet more grounded. The calm was deeper, not just practiced. He had faced an uncomfortable process without losing himself to it. In conversations, he no longer avoided difficult topics. He approached them with patience. He understood that discomfort is not the enemy. Uncertainty is. As the year progressed, the story finally stopped appearing altogether. New topics replaced it. That is how public memory works. But personal memory works differently. It stores meaning, not headlines. Barış carried that meaning forward. He did not speak about the case often, but when he did, it was never with frustration. It was with clarity. He described it as something necessary, not unfortunate. A moment that reminded him that fairness must sometimes be protected actively. And then, unexpectedly, the experience came full circle. A new agreement crossed his desk, involving a property arrangement with unusually clear terms. The language was precise. Responsibilities were balanced. Expectations were realistic. It felt different. It felt right. Barış signed without hesitation. Not because it was perfect, but because it was honest. As he moved into the next phase of his life and career, one truth remained steady. Silence can be powerful, but clarity is stronger. Patience can protect dignity, but action protects fairness. The tenant case was no longer a story about conflict. It had become a quiet guide. And sometimes, the most meaningful chapters are the ones that teach you how to walk forward without looking back.